I've already done the host on this computer, so all you have to do is go and, yeah. You've done this before? Okay.
Actually, just a few days ago.
Okay.
Several people were sharing their screens. We got several weird audio feedback loops and things, so we'll get there.
That doesn't tend to happen to me. That's just one thing.
Well, you asked.
So there's some information in that email. You'll probably have to go back. Yes, whatever.
There's the
you might, yeah.
It looks like it.
There are some people that
That should be what it's.
it's not. It's showing you the slide that's up, and then it shows you the next one with the notes for that one.
That is very odd because
Yeah, usually it doesn't do
I
that.
have not seen it do that.
So if someone had notes, you've seen them, but you're not seeing notes for the current one. You know, it's just the introductory one, but.
It's 3 years.
Okay. For half of them, just for the early ones.
Yeah,
Maybe I did some notes. Oh my god. Wait, that's not mine. That's Rick. Oh, and this is perfect. You can't just touch the screen. Yeah. Sorry. You know what? Don't worry about it. The notes don't show up. I'll make everything out and just apologize.
let's do all.
Yeah. Oh, and I can get you. Let me just read them out.
Well, let me try. I think what it's.
It's doing the notes for that one. That's it. That's weird. That's great. Okay. So it's the one on the left. All right.
You know what it's doing. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get rid of that. I think so you might want to check just to make sure that you're coming through. I think it should.
We always put a little pressure on you to back to organizer, but we really.
No, I might not. It doesn't. Yeah, sure, we'll do that. And, Yeah, I think she knows.
On that. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Francisco Frey, Associate Librarian for Preservation, Conservation, and Digital Imaging for the Harvard Libraries. And I'm very pleased to welcome all of you this afternoon to a panel discussion about email archiving, presented by key experimenters and practitioners who are all using different approaches to accomplish this task. Many in the audience will know that stewarding born digital materials has been listed as one of the priorities of the Harvard Library and is of course also on the plate of the Stewardship Standing Committee. And since all of us are writing and reading probably way too many emails every day, this is a topic that we all have a very personal connection with. One aspect that's really intriguing me that it has only been a few years since tool development for email archiving has been started. And it's interesting to see that during that relatively short time frame, a shift has occurred, or is very much still occurring, from building proprietary tools that work within one institution to building a community that is starting to look at how to collaborate and build tools together. The goal really becomes then to contribute to the work everybody needs to do. This presentation that you came to be part of this afternoon is part of a meeting here at Harvard that has happened yesterday and this morning. And one of the goals of this meeting is to make progress on identifying gaps in the tool landscape and to work on brainstorming on how to fill these gaps collaboratively. The panel you are going to experience this afternoon was originally presented at the Society of American Archivists in August of 2012, and the panelists have updated their contents to reflect developments over the past 6 months. It is really a very fast-moving field. I would like to thank you all for coming, and I would also, of course, like to thank our presenters that are here this afternoon. But let me now start with introducing Chris Prom, who will be moderating the panel, and he will also help set the context of the different presentations that you're going to hear this afternoon, and then, of course, moderate the question and answer period. Chris is Assistant Archivist and Professor of Library Administration at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and he will be our moderator and host this afternoon. Please welcome Chris Prom.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to thank Harvard in particular for hosting this event and for bringing the group of practitioners together for the meeting yesterday. I really love these types of events. I feel like we're at a very exciting moment now, in particular with email preservation projects, a very collaborative moment, one in which there are lots of tools available need to fill in particular gaps so that as archivists, as librarians, as records managers, as curators, we can really go about the business that we want to go about. And I think a big part of that business actually is preserving correspondence between individuals. I was trained as a historian. I still wish I were a historian in some respects, because then I would not have to deal with the problem like preserving email. I think we can agree, though, that email is one of the richest, one of the most revealing, if not the most revealing, of sources that are currently being generated. I was in a meeting a few days ago with a professor of computer science at Illinois, a guy that does natural language processing, entity extraction, all kinds of things that are a little bit above my pay grade. And this community gets that issue. They see email as a source that's worth preserving. They read the news just like we do. They know that Hillary Clinton's server manager has now been granted immunity and is going to be testifying or talking to the FBI. They see things like the capture of the ClimateGate emails. They see this going on. And we know that it's a troublesome documentary format. It's true for people who are constructing histories. I was showing some students a few days ago in being introduced to archives for the very first time how hard it is to use correspondence, because what did the person know when they were writing it? What were they not revealing? Who were they writing to? All of those kinds of things. But for us as archivists, we're about evidence, we're about evidential value and trying to preserve that. So while we can't really deal with the historian's task of sorting through all of it and making the historical arguments, those things are covered in other sources, we do want to preserve email in a way that really does preserve its evidential value. And in order to do that, we need tools that we can use to manage things throughout the life cycle of curation tasks. That's actually a big focus of this meeting, seeing what those tasks are at the point of appraising email, processing it, preserving it, providing it to users. So if we do this correctly, I think we can give future generations of historians, future students and scholars, a real leg up on understanding what's been taking place sort of behind the scenes. I certainly know that this is true at my own institution, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. About a year and a half ago, we had a little controversy, a little scandal even, that led to the resignation of our chancellor, a woman who I personally respect deeply, whom I've met on multiple occasions, but who kind of forgot that you really shouldn't be using private email services to exchange information about controversial campus issues, and was forced to resign as a part of this. Now, what the university did at about 12 hours before she announced her resignation was provided a nice PDF file with all of these emails that she had used on her Gmail account and whatnot, and things that she had specifically tried to evade the Freedom of Information Act request by using. The problem is the true history of what went on will not be able to be written without preserving the original messages, not just scanned PDFs of documents and things that people print out. So unless we have tools that can allow us to preserve correspondence, whether it's captured from the server or somewhere else, historians really won't get the chance to sort through it. And we need to have tools that can help people, help us, that is, build trust with people that create email so that they can know when they give us things that they have some confidence in our ability to manage it correctly. Now, those tools need to be linked to tasks in the lifecycle model and a developing lifecycle model, I would say, for email preservation. I really would like to share with you, and I'm going to, in fact, to share with you a copy, image, I guess you could say, of the current version of lifecycle tools that can be managing for archival email stewardship. I'm going to bow, actually, in Wendy's direction here, because Wendy originated this chart in a very nice and easily comprehensible, that is, format with a lot fewer rows at one point in time. And it really was a great idea. There have been a lot of people involved in developing this. There is going to be a quiz afterwards. But basically what it does is it shows, and red is generally bad, I think that there are certain things that tools do and don't do, so that you can see there's actually about an equal balance of green and red on this chart. Now, I would say several years ago when I actually had the pleasure, or actually I don't think it was really a pleasure, it was more of a burden of writing a report about email preservation. This was back in 2011. And if I had done that chart at that point, I think it would have been probably 90% red. So the point is we made a lot of progress since then. There's a lot of progress yet to be done. And Harvard actually, by bringing this group together, is getting us to the next step that can benefit the community as a whole. I would say several years ago there was an idea that repositories and institutions were competitive in a lot of respects, wanted to develop kind of end-to-end system management tools for digital curation. I think we're kind of past that point now, and Harvard's really playing a leading role by bringing everybody together here. So anyway, this is where the tool is located. At least it was where it was located when I gave this talk at SAA, and hopefully it's still at that address. I would like to just very briefly acknowledge the contributors to this tool. As I've already pointed out, Wendy really took the lead in developing it, but you can see a wide range of people have contributed to it, including lots of names that will be known to some of us in the room here. Okay, so this is a good tool to use, and I certainly encourage you to take a look at it. But you're all probably ready to hear from somebody else. In fact, one of the people who contributed to the tool. So I'd just very briefly now like to introduce Glenn Edwards, who was formerly at the Schlesinger Library and since 2006 has been at Stanford and is head of technical services and manager of the Born Digital program in special collections. Glenn manages staff both on campus and at the Redwood City new campus that Stanford is developing, and has been active in the development and planning of facilities for special collections at a current location and an interim location. There were a lot of locations you were mentioning to me. Three times in 5 years, so we don't wish that on anyone. But anyway, if it ever happens to us, we know who to ask. And more pertinent to what we're talking about here this morning or this afternoon, Glenn is director of the EPad project, which is a really wonderful piece of software, which even I was able to get running on my laptop in under 10 minutes, and is really a wonderful tool for looking at and appraising and doing all kinds of wonderful things with email. This began as a Stanford-led project, and additionally there was an NHPRC grant that funded it, and currently have a 3-year IMLS grant to build out version 2.0 of the tool, I guess you could say. So anyway, welcome Glenn. Glenn is here to tell us all about EPad. I will demonstrate my technical incapabilities.
Luckily. Yeah. So, thank you for having me here today, and I really want to thank Wendy and everybody at Harvard for bringing us all together. The meeting here, in some ways, really built on a meeting that Kate Murray from LC was one of the organizers for this past summer. So I really want to make a nod to Kate as well. That was sort of the beginning of a group discussion on these issues.
Yes, here you are. So, wonderful.
Yeah, super, thank you. So first, for those of you who aren't familiar with EPad, it's a software developed by special collections staff at Stanford. We are on our second grant. We had some partners on the first grant, and our release for 1.0 came out this past summer. The current partners on the IMLS grant are Harvard, University of California, Irvine, New York Metro, which is a conglomeration of a lot of different groups who have actually been very great at documenting user stories. So it's been really wonderful. University of Illinois, Chris, and Chris from the University of Illinois. So the software is meant to be sort of a standalone package. It does not do preservation at this point. Our digital library systems and services department, who maintain our digital repository, are not at this point involved in the development of the software. Although we do have one of the SDR programmers as an advisor. So the software is meant to process, appraise, discover, and deliver. We deliver only in the reading room, full content of unrestricted emails, and the discovery is only extracted entities through a web interface. And at this point, we only have one collection online, so, but we have 2 others in process. So it's built on the core functions that came out of the AIMS project, and I was part of the AIMS project along with a partner in the DLSS group. And so in that project as well, and so many other projects had worked on preservation, we tackled the rest of the areas of stewarding born digital material and produced a white paper. But so the same functions are echoed in EPad, appraisal, pre-acquisition. Here it's accessioning, processing, discovery, and deliver. So accessioning is actually part of our appraisal module. This is just a timeline of documenting our focus on email. One of the collections, the poet Robert Creeley, was one of the pilot collections that we were tasked to process during the AIMS project. And we attempted to process his email. It was on about 50 floppies through a sequence of different softwares. And one of them was Forensic Toolkit. At that point, if you flagged a message as restricted, it would flag everything in the inbox. I think it's gotten a little better. But so we were looking for something that would have a little bit more nuance to it. And we ran across a project, a dissertation project by a PhD student at Stanford, Sudhindra Hangal, who's still very integral to the project. So we've been working together basically since 2010. And it was called Muse. So the first EPad program was built on Muse, sort of an enhancement of it. And the current one is building it out further. And as I said, the first release was this summer. One thing I'd point out is we did receive 3 different grants from Stanford Libraries that allowed us to develop little pieces, often between grants, as proof of concept. So the first one was to do an online discovery platform. That was a pilot, and that was before we knew we were getting the NHRC grant. The UI grant was while we were finishing up our development, and then we also got another one around the time I presented SAA, but before we knew we were getting the IMS grant, and that allowed us to do an enhancement in our development. I'm not sure where all this little squares are. One in my slide originally. Sorry. So during processing, we wanted to provide the ability to do regular expression searches to discover restricted data, to flag items for transferring or not to the archive, to annotate restricted materials. We also added some configuration files. There are where you can edit certain, my notes are too big, but I'm trying to think. We actually, I'm going to skip that, we actually also came out with a release in October, and this was so, but we had our programmer still funded by Stanford at that point to work on adding certain things that we hadn't included we did some bug fixes for the fall. And one of the bottom one on the right, the ability to import an CSV file. One of our use cases was a faculty member who had originally given us his archive several years ago. He's on the Discovery site, that initial platform online. When it came to actually really publishing it and providing access in the reading room, decided he had 300 correspondents in his email archive that he did not want any access given. He wanted them restricted. And the only easy way to do that was for us to actually program so that,
Yeah, could you please mute your microphone, whoever's mic is live on the on WebEx?
Thank you. This is a collection overview. This was from our original site where we had both collections. So Richard Fikes is the one who came to us after and said, no, I have 300 people. I don't want to go for their email, our correspondence yet. And Robert Creeley is currently the only collection on our Discovery page and in our reading room. He's a Black Mountain poet. But there are 2 in process, so within a few months we should be posting 2 more collections. So when you ingest an email archive and you do it through the import tab, and you've pointed to however many email accounts this person has that you're uploading. It does a lot of batch processing in the background, and it gives you basically an aggregate summary of all the correspondence, also people, organizations, and places that are pulled through the NLP. It also pulls up items from the lexicon searches. Sensitive messages in this case is restricted data, is discovering through regular expression searches. And in this is probably a subcategory of Robert Creeley, this sample, because when I actually processed it, there's about 80 sensitive messages, a lot of Social Security numbers, a lot of them. And then it gives you our images, documents, and other attachments. And I think actually this is an older slide, and things have changed around because we currently have some beta that's out for the. So here is, I just have drilled into the person entities, and the NLP that we originally started with was Apache OpenNLP, but Sutindra and Viharya, our other programmer, it wasn't doing quite what they wanted, so they built their own NLP engine, and it's enhanced. So this will give you, it sorts originally by top hits, so the number of messages associated with that particular entity. You can sort it alphabetically as well. You can also go to a graph view, which I don't actually show you in this instance. I should say those are editable, so you can merge Bob with Robert Creeley, if you really want to. This is just a really quick view of the image wall. I'm forgetting the software that we were using, but it's actually not supported anymore. And so we need to try to find another open source image browser that we can embed in the program. So we're looking for that. Okay. Well, maybe, yeah. But I think it needs to be open source. So that's something that I know Sutindra is looking into right now. But this is actually a great way to just quickly view to see if there's any objectionable images that you don't want to deliver. And then when you drill into an image, it actually gives you a link out to the message. So it shows you the context. So here is, you can edit your regular express. So this is, interesting, creating a new lexicon, and this isn't actually the regular expression search for background editing. So I apologize. This looks more like trying to create a sensitive lexicon that is a very, very old version. It's a little more robust at this point, although it still needs a lot of development. It's not an area that we have a lot of staff time because the rest of it just sort of sucks all our time. So the regular expression search results, Social Security numbers, credit card numbers, you can add routing information for banks, driver's license, you know, any other kind of numbers that you need to identify, and it'll highlight them when you get your results. So in this case, there's only 2, and we've obscured the Social Security number. It's amazing when you're looking at this how much people just included their Social Security numbers for the most mundane things. So luckily, half of them were Robert Creeley's, and I didn't have to worry because he's passed. So the lexicons, and there's a few different lexicons that are defaults with the software. There's sentiment sensitive, and then there's just sort of a generic one. They'll do multiple queries at a time. They do stemming searches on words, so you don't have to have all the derivations of a particular term. One of the things that we're hoping to do is really try to get a group of people who are interested in working on building more robust lexicons that we can sort of host from the project site for now. So that's an area that we would love to develop more. Here is a view of the sensitive lexicon. So any of the lexicons that exist there, you can edit. You can create your own. And they're very modifiable. You have to select a particular lexicon in order to see the results from that lexicon, and they show up as facets on the result page. This is just a view of, happens to be the sensitive lexicon of the graph. Because this is a small subset, it's not that exciting. Usually the graph is a little more interesting. But it also shows you the number of hits, and if you move your mouse into one of the shaded areas, it'll take you to those messages for that particular category. The query generator is sort of a very robust search you can put a massive amount of text in the query generator to search against the archive. So usually what we do for Robert Creeley is take a paragraph from Wikipedia of other individuals who are associated with Black Mountain College, and we run it against this archive. And what it does is EPad looks for entities within the search query, and then it looks and compares them with your archive, and it highlights the ones that have messages within the archive. So if they're underlined in red, they're an entity, and if they're highlighted, there's messages. If you put your cursor over one of them, you'll see the date and subject line of the messages. And then you can just go directly to one if you want. We have attempted to put a huge block of text in there. We use Moby Dick and put data in there. It takes a while to check through it, but it actually does work. It's kind of interesting. But we were thinking a lot of people would probably come with lists of individuals or subjects that they might be interested in. It's a quick and easy way for searching rather than building a lexicon. Okay, so the image wall is really lovely. The document attachments are a bit of an issue. So we can see the subjects. We know what messages they're attached to. And you can sometimes see an extension, but we can't open most of them in the software. So in the delivery environment or on a processing computer, I can have QuickView Plus installed and actually open them. But that is a little bit of something we'd love to be able to resolve, but I just don't know if we're going to be able to. It's easier just to have QuickView Plus. So EPad also does allow authority searching and disambiguation. We do use FAST, OCLC's FAST, for searching for person names, and I guess free base for location and organizations. We're looking at other APIs, other things to use. In order for it to search and find use fast, it doesn't actually require that you use the internet, because we've brought those terms and our more nuanced NER as well into EPad. But if you want to go out to actually check DBpedia and some of these, and to link out to actually create an authority, to link to it, then you are using the internet. So it kind of depends on how closed you want your system to be when you're working with EPad. It also does a little bit of comparison within the email archive itself to, for instance, if you have single names like, and this is the Jeb Bush archive, you know, you hover over Susan, and it pulls up the Susans that show up in the archive. And then it gives you a ranking of which one it thinks this person is. And you can believe it or not, or you can review the others to see if you have a different opinion. This is our current project site. As I said, we're on our second grant. It's an IMLS grant for 3 years. We're in the beginning phases, so while we do have a roadmap, which I'll turn to in a second, I sort of feel like we're in a little bit of a squishy period of trying to decide what other programs we might try to, and other code we might try to bring into the software, and what our outputs will be. I should have pointed out there is a 3-minute little intro that our community manager recorded and put up. So for people who are very unfamiliar, it's a nice intro. For each release, and we're currently working on release 1, it'll come out in June. Our issues are up online and on GitHub. They're open. The issues for the other releases are sort of behind the scenes for our partners and us to discuss each cycle. But the current ones are going up, and they are viewable by anyone who's interested. This is the roadmap. These are the things that we're interested in tackling during this grant period, among others. And these are things that currently EPad does not do. So I think this meeting we've been having here in the last few days has been wonderful, just talking to other individuals who are associated with particular tools, but also other institutions and their workflows and sort of their workflows and how we might modify what we're going to be working on in the next few years. And that's it for me. So,
okay, thank you, Glenn. That was really wonderful introduction to EPad, and I know I'm looking forward to using some of those new features that I have not yet seen. Okay, and right. So our second speaker this afternoon comes to us by way of the Smithsonian Archives, where he's currently Director of Digital Services. He joined the archives in 2013, that is, to lead its electronic records program, and in 2005 became project manager for the Collaborative Electronic Records Project, which was a joint effort of the Smithsonian Archives and Rockefeller Archive Center that focused on the challenges of email preservation. And I would say, actually, that if the phrase trailblazer for email preservation were to come to my mind, which it just did, I would think of this gentleman sitting 2 places to my left. So anyway, this project provided guidance both for email depositors and the SERP email preservation parser, which was released as an open source tool at the end of the project in 2008. As a member of the DAS, that's Digital Archive Specialist, for those of you who are not in the know, faculty, he teaches the Tools and Services course that is Achieving Email Account Preservation as XML, which I think is also at least being considered for revision in light of some of the work that he's done recently. As if this weren't enough to keep him busy, he also joined the faculty of Johns Hopkins, the Johns Hopkins University, I guess that is, University's Digital Curation Certificate program this past fall. Please join me in welcoming Rick Ferrante.
It's interesting how you get from 2013 to 2005.
Yeah, that was a good trick.
So I like that. I'll get younger still. So here we go. So Collaborative Electronic Records Project is going to be referred to as CERP. It's become how we refer to this in the parlance. Let me first give you a little set of data points about the Smithsonian Archives. Our first accession containing digital materials was received in 1994. It actually dated back to the early 80s. The content did. We take in 300 plus accessions each year. And over 50% of those have some kind of digital material in them now. So we're constantly getting this in. Over the course of a year, we get about 1,000 pieces of removable media. We've had a couple of all-digital accessions in the past week. And we're taking the websites and social media. We are capturing the email accounts of the noteworthy people at the institution as they leave. Attrition is not super fast, but we have taken in about 5 emails so far this year. They're larger and larger in size, so the one we took in last week was 20 gig. So that's some of our issues that we came into this with. They've definitely grown, but scale is a big issue for us. For the Rockefeller Archive Center, when we got together and worked on this project, we didn't have a person. So they were grappling with what was coming in and trying to find something to do with that. Fairly small archives, had 25 different depositors in the Rockefeller Archive family of institutions. And so they really were trying to figure out how to control the flood that was coming into them. Because they didn't have a lot of sophistication in terms of digital things, what we wanted to build between us was something that would work for people who were more IT adept, as well as people who volunteered and they were the only person at a historical society or organization, because everybody's getting this stuff at this point in time. So this kind of recaps the different things. My favorite example is a CIO who left the institution a while back. She had over 250,000 emails when we acquired her account. That's not the largest, it's just my favorite example. So we've moved on, and I'll talk a little bit about where we've gone to a tool that we created last year called DarkMail. But before I get there, this is an older version of the chart. The SERP parser and the DarkMail bars have not changed. But this is hopefully a little bit easier to read than the current version. There's just so much information that it's really hard to see it in a public space. So go to the Google Doc. SERP parser itself is a tool to do preservation migration of email. Designed to scale, it can do as little as one message with attachments to full accounts of email messages. It'll preserve related messages, and I say that because it doesn't have to be an account. It could be a group of related emails in their original order and organization, and moves them from mbox format into the email account XML schema, which allows us then as an XML file to validate and make sure that it's compliant before we're done. It can run on a single workstation, Mac, Windows, Linux, or in a client-server environment, and it's open source. In terms of the lifecycle aspect of things that Wendy naively put in front of a bunch of people and we just glommed onto, we have some prerequisites for the SERP parser. Because it is a tool, it's not an archival information system. That is that the appraisal, the decision to take this in, has been done beforehand. Also, the capture is not something that the tool itself does. It has to be captured and then brought to the tool. We have taken in PSTs, Microsoft Outlook, GroupWise, Lotus Notes, CC Mail, Pine, so a variety of different formats. So in order for us to then begin using the SERP parser or DarkMail, there's a preliminary normalization into the mbox format. So the activities that we do support through the SERP parser is, and this falls in the accessioning column, and this is part of what we're noodling through as we work on the Google Doc. We're normalizing, if you will, or transforming into the XML. It falls in the column of accessioning, but in terms of our workflow, it happens at the preservation stage. So that's what it does. It's embedding or representing the hierarchical organization, even including messages nested inside of messages, all with their different attachments. It's capturing all of that in a single XML file. If you want the attachments to be exported into a directory tree that matches that organization, you can configure that. In terms of archival processing, it's adding additional metadata into a companion file that allows you to carry that information forward rather than having to generate it by hand. Part of the whole idea behind an account-based approach is when you have 250,000 messages, describing each of those messages individually becomes a gargantuan task. And if you have 8 accounts a year with 250,000 messages each, then it's an undoable task. So that's really where we were going with this. At the very bottom, it looks like it's getting cut off, but it's not. We're generating the rest of the email elements of our archival package. And the components of that package were common between ourselves and the Rockefeller Archive Center, but everybody's archival package is different. It may be more than some people need. It may be less than others. Just a quick picture of what we produce with this. This is the top of the XML file. The SERP parser did not get to the point of a GUI view of a graphical view of what it has been producing. But you'll have here a representation. These are collapsed, so it's easier to see. The account, an ID for a handle server if you're going to do that. And then you have a folder. Inside of that, you have 2 messages and then a subfolder. And you see how it begins to nest down. There's no limit in the schema as to how far you can go. When you get inside, I've popped open one of the messages. Part of the tool design is to capture everything that's in an email message. So while you look at it through Outlook or a web client, you're only seeing part of it. everything inside is captured, nothing is lost. So here you can see some of those elements, and then you get down further into the message and you see the body, and that gives you a kind of a really quick look at what that produces. As you can tell, if you don't read XML in its raw form, this is really ugly and hard to look at and not nice to put in front of a researcher to try and work through. But the money ran out. We got as far as preserving things. When you can't go all the way to the end, it's still running the race as far as you can get. Somebody else can pick it up from there and go forward. There are some activities that are outside of the parser scope, SERP parser. Appraisal capture we talked about before. Intellectual arrangement. For us at the Smithsonian Archives, this is true for DarkMail as well, that intellectual arrangement is happening within our collection management system, not within DarkMail or the SERP parser. The SERP parser didn't allow for any searching whatsoever, unless you were doing find and you knew how to structure XML. We didn't do any kind of redaction or regular expression searching. We didn't automatically dump it into a repository, and without the searching, you really can't provide access. So, we had a wonderful person join our organization, at least part-time volunteer, who was a programmer for NIH, and he looked at what we did and he says, well, why stop? And we said, well, what can we do about this? And we came up with a tool that took that schema and the functionality that we'd created and moved it out of an open source framework that nobody really uses anymore. SERP is built on Squeak, and moved it into something that was a lot more popular, Python and MySQL. As you can see, it does a little bit more green, and I'll go into that. We tried to figure out what to name it, and I came up with DarkMail, which is Digital Archive Email.
Slightly evil.
Yes. I've regretted that, but it's out. Yeah. Anyway, I could get sidetracked. So what does it do in addition to the SERP parser functions? It provides a GUI interface to this. It processes, it does the preservation step 4 times faster, and when you're dealing with things that are close to 1 million messages in length, that's really important. We are using it in production, and we have been for a year and a half now, and other archives are testing that. Oh, wrong keyboard. So what we do in addition here really comes to the issues of intellectual arrangement, search capability, and access. Let me go from the bottom up. Access for that DarkMail enables is not online access. We can set up an instance of DarkMail in a reading room, load the accounts that the researcher is interested in, and let them have at it after we teach them the interface. That's access. That's a lot better than we had out of the SERP parser, but it's not the end goal for us. Because it's a GUI interface, it allows our archivists to run through the accounts, search through it, look at the partners and individuals, look at who is handing different documents back and forth. It allows us to do some intellectual arrangement there. We have fielded searching, and I'll show you a couple of pictures of that as well, which gives us a really pretty powerful interaction with that. And actually, I can't show you that because I didn't put that screenshot in. But we're able to search on address names. If something doesn't go out to the internet, right, you may only have the person's name. So you can put in John Brown, and it will bring back all of the content. It has that as the name in the address field. You can combine that with a subject line or a partial subject line. You can do stemming. You can include, I want to see everything that was newsletter.rtf. Brings back all of the messages with that and drops it down. It lets you look at the different formats and potentially download the attachments if you've got that there. We don't open the attachments in the tool because attachments are so varied in format that there's no guarantee that whoever has it has a plug-in for their browser to support that. It's always important to tell people what you don't do. So we still don't do appraisal and capture. We still don't do sensitive data processing, so we can't screen out PII. We still don't dump it in the repository. We still don't do online discovery. But the reason why we're here is we know where we end. We have an idea where some of the other tools connect or could connect. We know what they can do. So we're figuring out what kind of bridges we need to build so we all move forward. Thanks.
So our final presenter is somebody that is known to many of you, I expect, although I do think there's one thing you don't know about her. I can guarantee if you don't remember anything else this afternoon, you'll probably remember what I'm about to tell you, and that's that Wendy knew that she wanted to be a librarian since she was very young. In fact, she used to hold story hour for her stuffed animals. Making sure to set up the illustrations so that every animal, she was the true equal access person. Every animal could see every illustration set up in a circle. Unfortunately, as you know, you need a little bit more than that to become a librarian or a professional. So Wendy did, in fact, go on to graduate with a concentration in archives from Simmons College, and actually had a I was interested to know, and I had no idea until you provided me the bio, the variety of positions you served in during your time as a librarian, as an archivist, as a manager in library, starting off as an apprentice paper conservator in the rare book department at Boston Public, then working as a reference librarian in the prints and photographs department, and as manager of the Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site, working with the firm's landscape, architectural prints, and drawings. I think it's very interesting to see a move into email preservation from that, and certainly bringing a lot of interesting skills to this problem. Wendy's currently working, as many of you know, in Harvard's, the Harvard Library on technology prospects, and really on all aspects of planning for born digital materials. So I present to you Wendy Coco.
Thank you so much. So before I start my presentation, I have two thoughts. One is just to tell this group what a pleasure it's been to have them here at Harvard and how fortunate we are and how great I feel the discussion is going in this whole area of how interoperable eventually we can be to help the full community. And there are also some other people throughout the audience who've been in the workshop, and I just thank you all very much. The second thing is not so fun for me, which is that Skip Kendall has promised me that because of email archiving, he is going to save the stupid message I sent out at 8:30 this morning that you all saw. Thank you very much. It was meant to go just to Priscilla, and hopefully we've all done that and we feel a little bit of empathy for me, rather than, oh dear God, she's working in our technology. So just a couple thoughts there for you. So I am at home base, which feels wonderful, but this presentation started out outside of home base, and so I needed to provide context to other folks, and I'm going to keep it in here. So for those of you who know all this stuff or think I'm wrong, you know, all power to you, but there are potentially some of you that may learn some cool facts about Harvard. So we have 73 individual libraries, and I know if you've been here for some time, that number has changed on occasion. We have approximately 900 staff members in the library. We've been collecting for more than 375 years in multiple formats, which range from cuneiforms and papyrus scrolls through illuminated manuscripts and motion picture films and audio recordings of poetry and LSD trips, yes, look it up, to websites, blogs, and now email messages and attachments. Amongst our digital holdings are the content stored in our Preservation and Access Repository, the Digital Repository Service, or DRS. The DRS is 14 years old now, and it was launched in 2002 and has some 60 million files and 190 terabytes of data. It's one of several repositories at the university, and so when Rick was talking about scale, and in fact I think all of us at this table are going to encounter that at some point. The university archives holdings in the DRS are almost 500,000 files and 4 terabytes of data, including digitized historic material and web archives, and soon to include email. In a moment, I'll show you how our email archiving system integrates with the DRS. But back to the infamous chart. So within the context of Harvard Library, our scale and our technical infrastructure, and against the backdrop of the Lifecycle chart that you've been hearing about, I'm going to talk about our EASE, or Electronic Archive System. It was developed to handle email and message attachments first, but with the idea that it would be extensible for other formats in the future. EASE was released in May for use by the development project partners, the archivists that helped set the functional requirements for the system, and this is where we are in the Lifecycle chart. If I close in a bit, you can see that we have not addressed the full lifecycle for email archiving, and I think you saw that nobody fully has, which is why this whole discussion is happening. Green represents the areas of activity we fully support, and red represents the areas that we don't. We do not support the collection development activity of pre-acquisition appraisal for donors or archivists that you saw in EPad, and I think, Rick, you mentioned you don't either, so we have the same kind of red area there. And we do not provide direct capture from mail servers as part of our accessioning activities, same as Rick mentioned. Because of the sensitive nature of email collections in general, we have many challenges related to providing access and have not tackled discovery or access in a concerted way. So now I'm going to focus a little bit on what we did build, so it's all green. We support accessioning, processing, and preservation activities. Here it's important to note that Harvard archivists have the same needs as archivists everywhere to fulfill the entire life cycle for the email collections they acquire, not just these activities we support. We looked for available tools before building, but there were none that met our needs and the needs of cultural heritage institutions in general, and I think this is why you see all these building efforts. In addition, because of the scale of our library and the size of our collections, and also because we already had a robust existing infrastructure, we custom-built our system. EASE integrates with our Preservation and Access Repository, the DRS. I guess, so this is like probably over-naming things you already know, but I explain my acronyms just in case. So that email messages and attachments can be deposited at the click of a mouse for long-term preservation. EASE and the DRS also integrate with a new vocabulary registry built in response to EASE called WordShack, which I'll touch on in a little bit. Please note that DRS provides format-specific delivery for the fully supported formats we preserve. So that's over on this, can I see my mouse? Yeah. So over on this right-hand side, for email accounts, attachments that conform to any of these formats can already be delivered. So it's kind of an interesting pattern. However, we need to develop a delivery service for the email messages itself. And again, how useful it is to engage in this discussion with everyone and see what tools might meet that need. Despite the simple boxes, there's a very complex underlying infrastructure of multiple servers, multiple copies of content, including copies stored remotely, and a new security architecture for the transfer, processing, and storage of sensitive data that we built for EASE and DRS. Email is the first content in the library's central infrastructure that includes sensitive data. Our digital content until now has been primarily historical collections digitized for public access. So we had purposely, DRS had pretty purposely been filled with mostly public access material, and so the email collections really challenged us. We won't provide access to email collections outside of authorized system users until we address policies and access controls for online discovery and delivery. And therefore, the archivists are mediating access now. And if any questions come up about that, after Skip can likely address what that means. And he's laughing. We won't provide access. One of the primary reasons that EASE was not developed as open source software like the other tools presented here is because of the close and custom integration with Harvard's DRS to ensure long-term preservation of these important born digital collections. So we put a lot of work into specific development that worked within our own infrastructure that would have been very difficult to present as open source. However, we used mainly open source software, including Java, JavaScript, and Solr running on Linux. We also use proprietary software, including Oracle as the relational database and eMalchemy for some of our normalization processes. So we normalize to EML when we take in email. We're now planning to make EASE open source and hoping to build interoperability with the community so that we can take advantage of the tools that others are building and they can take advantage of what we have built. So I'm going to cover just in a little bit more detail a couple of the pieces of the life cycle chart. Looking back at the activities in the accessioning part of the life cycle chart, we address normalization. We convert from the native email format to EML for processing and preservation. Currently, we can convert 5 email clients, and we're also saving all of the files in their original format. So those of you with potential collections in the future, you'll just challenge us to keep adding to this list of formats we can accept. As part of ingest, we're rewriting line breaks in email for consistency and handling attachments by decoding them, extracting embedded attachments, and reattaching external ones. We also address many activities in the archival processing part of the chart. We enable both bulk and item-level processing to provide archivists with the flexibility to process collections minimally before long-term storage, or even to a very detailed level for individual email messages or attachments. Archivists can add, remove, edit metadata, such as descriptive or administrative metadata, and delete email messages and or attachments. Technical metadata is automatically applied at 2 points during ingest to ease and at deposit to the DRS. The ease administrative user interface for archivists is called EASY for Ease Interface. Here's a screenshot of the first screen for archivists. Or was that yes, it is. Did I have a screenshot in the previous? All right, so I'm behind. Let me go back. This is the first one. So this is the first screen archivists would use to submit a packet to ease. Let me point out the standard layout we have in the UI, and the UI is called Easy. On the top, there's a count information and 2 levels of menu navigation. And I think the mouse is trapped. Let me see if I can. There you go. Okay, so account information up here, then 2 levels of menu navigation. And then a metadata panel on the left and a content panel on the right where the data displays. Here, using the metadata panel, I don't see there it is. Okay, so here using the metadata panel, an archivist can add any metadata that applies to the whole packet. The 5 red stars, can you see them? They're very tiny. They indicate the only metadata elements that are required, and 3 of them are automatically populated by the system. So we really did this in response to listening to you all, to the Harvard archivists and curators who said, we really may not be able to spend a lot of time when we're about to pull something in. Can you give us a minimal set of metadata to just push it through the whole process, get it into the preservation repository, and we could go back later and process. So that's what we did. Once the packet is ingested, archivists can work with the data. This shows the whole packet. At the top, you can see that EASY supports fielded and full text searching and the ability to refine search results through filters. This screenshot shows items selected in the content pane for batch processing. When archivists enter metadata in the panel on the left, when you're doing batch processing, it applies to the whole selection. Additionally, here's where an archivist can choose to delete the selected item or push to DRS for long-term preservation. And do you see where that is? This is delete, and this is push to DRS, and it would apply to everything that's selected. During batch processing, for any of the metadata elements that have a light bulb, the archivist can expose all of the metadata values for a selected set. Here we're looking at the metadata values for collection name for a set of 2,431 items. Here you can see that there are items in this set that have been associated with 2 different collections. 239 items with the CODA project, and 19 with a Grunya collection. And there are many items here with no collection association. A similar mechanism, this kind of pop-up window, is used to edit these values. Moving from batch processing to item-level processing, in the item-level display for an email, the archivist can see the original email that includes all of the headers, a text version, or an HTML version. This is the text version. Information extracted from the email is shown at the top of the metadata panel, and below is metadata that can be added, edited, or deleted. Here also the items can be deleted or pushed to DRS for long-term preservation, and those choices are in the same place. We try to keep the panels consistent throughout. This is the item-level display for an attachment. Note that the metadata panel displays information about the attachment's associated email. The attachment can be downloaded, deleted, or pushed to DRS for long-term preservation. Let me point out WordShack in the menu bar. Ease uses WordShack, our controlled vocabulary maintenance system for entity resolution, to resolve the multiple identities of a single person. And then I'm always kind of embarrassed to show this, but for example, to make sure that all the ways I'm referred to resolve to me, or a very young me, so I'll just keep resolving to the same age, I think, no matter what happens in real life. For supporting intellectual arrangement, Ease documents the original order using the directory path of each message or attachment, and also allows archivists to create an optional association to a collection, as you saw in the editing panel. For handling sensitive data, Ease looks for social security numbers and credit card numbers and flags potential hits for archivists who would need to take manual action if required. So right now there's no automated processes that run when you identify potentially sensitive material. So now we're going to look at the preservation activities in the lifecycle chart. Once an archivist clicks the button to push content to the DRS, the submission package that Ease creates for transfer and deposit to our digital repository service conforms to what you may know of as a SIP in the OAIS reference model. What we store in our preservation repository are preservation packages for 4 different object types related to email. The package for each object type contains a descriptor file, and these are the 4 different object types we store in the DRS. The descriptor has all of the metadata, including relationships and pointers to the content. It is a METS container file with embedded mods for descriptive metadata, premise for preservation metadata, format-specific technical metadata, and also administrative metadata. Within premise, we include generic technical metadata and information about events that we track, such as the conversion to EML, deletions, and handling of attachments. Also in premise, we include basic rights management. We support preserving contracts and policies with associated content in the DRS, assigning embargo periods, and choosing the required level of data security. So looking back at the chart, and this is actually just a view of a section of the new chart that you'll find if you go to the online location. Archivists and technologists at Harvard worked very closely together to support the activities I just described, and now we look forward to contributing to and working with the whole community on efforts to fulfill the whole life cycle. That's it. Please clap. But what we're going to do is move to...
Right, I think what we'll...
Okay.
Yes, right. In fact, what we'll do is we will move to questions. So we'd be happy to take any questions for the panel. We'd actually be happy to have a broad discussion. We have quite a bit of time, actually, until we're scheduled to be done here. We have until 3 o'clock. So I thought we could both do questions about the presentations and maybe have a broader discussion about things that all of you would like to do and be able to do with email, what you feel is necessary for the community to take a big step forward, because that's really been the theme of our work together as a group over the last day and a half, is what can we do to integrate these tools, build them out in a way that there's the possibility for archivists here at Harvard, archivists elsewhere, to do the work we do. Actually, I'm always interested when I come back to Harvard. I've been here, I think, 3 or 4 times now, because, you know, the part of the Midwest I come from, Harvard, is you know, this godlike institution. And I say that with a full sense of irony. Because when I come here, I'm reminded every time that there are 50 or more or less special collections and archives at any given moment. So what that really tells me is that every archive is a small archive and has the same problems. And we really are at a point where I think we can address these issues collaboratively in a very productive way. So with that, I'd like to just throw things open for questions, comments, and thoughts from the audience. Oh, sure, and I'll be happy to restate the question each time. Yes. So, Kari.
So, Wendy, this is about the ease. So, in the plan for the hope for making ease an open source system that could be installed by other places, given the reliance of the DRS in most of how ease works on sort of all levels, how do you sort of see that being separated out such that you don't have to have the DRS under you?
Okay, so just for the benefit of the remote audience, the question essentially is, given that one role of ease is to push materials into Harvard's specific repository, which is the DRS, how do you see it potentially playing a role with other repository systems?
It's an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it because I'm very proud that we took some time in the last several months to work very closely with the primary developer for ease, whose name is Grania Riley, and she's in the room. Hi, Grania. And I'm going to get titles wrong, so excuse me on this, but the head of development from LTS, who is Randy Stern, and the new architect, what is, Anthony's title? Library Technology Architect, to do an analysis and come up with a potential plan to abstract out so that if you had something, you would either, it would be, for lack of a better way to say it, it would be modules, and in the abstraction, you would either hook into something that does a similar function that something in our central infrastructure does, or you would close off that function and look to do some other next step.
Okay, great, thank you. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
For any of the programs that are doing direct capture or have appraisal, can you say a little bit about what you do with spam or viruses that come in?
Okay, so really good question. Lots of email accounts have spam viruses in them, and for the tools that do appraisal and capture, what do you do to identify those, and then what do you do with them? What do the programs do with them?
Dealing with spam or a lot of the mail that you get that one might call spam is really up to an organization or repository how they want to deal with it. It may not be significant in a particular email archive and worth the amount of time it would take to uncover all of it. For Robert Peely, there was not a lot of spam. I mean, you got a lot of listservs, a lot of political mail. He was on a lot of email lists. That's part of his corpus, and I wasn't really looking to weed that out. In regards to viruses, if they're coming in on obsolete media, there's virus checks then. If there's anything embedded in an attachment, actually I don't know how that's dealt with. We're not. I'd have to check with my group back at Stanford, and I can post a
the issue you just mentioned of ones that are embedded in attachments, we at the University of Illinois actually came up against this issue a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, when we had an email account where messages and attachments, basically what ended up happening when we accessioned it, the tool we used spun off the attachments as separate files, And at that point, the server that it goes onto, there's a monitoring of that server by a virus check program that our IT operations set up. So you could essentially just run any standard virus scanner against the attachments once they're separated from email to identify those.
I just want to say that question about what we do with spam is a great question. Viruses are much easier to identify. What is really spam and what's not spam in somebody's corpus is really a challenge because you can't apply regular expressions to that. So that's an important thing for us to look at.
Yeah, and it does get to sort of the broader question too of what's an appropriate processing level for these collections. That depends a lot on what the repository sees as important and what your standards are. I can just say in my own context, I'd be very unlikely to go into a folder of paper-based documents and pull individual items out, so somebody's travel brochures or whatever. And so similarly, I wouldn't necessarily, in my own case, take the time to remove it. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I should know your name, but I...
I work here at Harvard. Yeah. So my question is, do you preserve trash or deleted items if they're not completely removed but are in the trash folder?
Right. So the question is a similar one. What do you do with trash and deleted items? And, yeah, Kari, you had it.
I responded earlier to the comment, but it was exactly about that, and that was sort of a matter of the donor wishes. So we had talked with the donor. She had said she was going to go through her email, delete all the stuff she didn't want, and what she did was she put it all in the trash, but she didn't delete the trash before we brought in the account. So we ended up with everything that was in the trash. But because the desire up front was that stuff would not come to us, we then went ahead and deleted that, deleted that out because the intent was not for us to grab it. So that's a general policy we have of we are not taking in hidden or deleted content that we haven't otherwise made an explicit arrangement with the donor on. But that was one thing that happened where I was hoping it would be all free and clear, and then I started seeing all the softball messages, and I'm like, what is this? And it was because it was all just sitting in the trash can. That just hadn't been emptied. That was until we did it in 19.
Yeah.
And I think, it's partly, an agreement or with the donor creator. But, there's times when you've received an archives for somebody who's passed and you just get everything. And then it becomes sort of an institutional policy for your repository, what you're going to do with those. I forgot what else I was going to say on that, if I remember.
So with our tool, we'll automatically capture it. If we don't want to preserve that, then we need to manually intervene before we get there. But we also think of this true, and Kari's point is well taken, is we don't know what knowledge can be gleaned from that years down the road. The whole idea of what somebody thought was important to delete, or what was not relevant in the course of the work that they were doing, becomes valuable information. So it's tough to make that call. I think we would say at the Smithsonian, if we don't have explicit instructions that this is outside of the deed of gift or whatever, then we would keep it.
So I just had a comment building on that I remember from the Archiving Email Symposium in D.C. In the summer, and it's interesting to hear that we're so early in email archiving that people are focusing on a particular kind of curated personal collection, but somebody brought up, and I found it fascinating, that as an archivist, she felt that she may actually be collecting spam for future research.
Well, that's an interesting point. I managed to stumble across something not that long ago. I'm getting the exact title of this, but it was something like my crazy father-in-law's email archives, the emails Red State America forwards to each other. No offense intended. But I actually do think there are value in those regardless of which side of the political spectrum they're coming from. So anyway, Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment from it. I mean, I think that this is, well, I want to push back on the concept of appraisal because, essentially what you're doing at Smithsonian is you're making that value judgment on you're making it on a macro level, right? And it's the, you said you're bringing in the high value, or, like top officers, and you can, so just to say, my own view of what archivists do is that it's not an accident. So a lot of things happen by accident, but I think intentional decision making, especially on, is what is the archival thing. You're recognizing that sometimes we do things that we can't imagine the value. How I believe we should be doing is, imagining what the best archive could be and working towards that, and realizing that that's not. So, but then kind of getting back to appraisal, one of your slides has this intellectual, it's like it's appraisal for intellectual content or something like that. That's something that EPad does, and so to me, like the scale that we're working on with email archive, but once we start bringing it in, and we're not going to be looking at, I think we have to work in the macro scale, and the idea that we would be sustainable. But so, what is going on, like, with the Freely archive? Were you looking at individual messages and thinking, or is it,
what the software does is you ingest into Appraisal, and Appraisal, the Appraisal module is where you bring the original email archive in. It does allow a creator, if they're using that, the ability to actually weed out specific things and mark them as do not transfer.
Oh, to the creator.
Yes, if they want to. Now, have we had a creator do that? No. What they do is they send us a list of correspondence that they don't want included for various reasons, or they want restricted for a period of time. But it does a lot of batch processing. It extracts specific terms. We're looking, as I said, for PII, we're looking for sensitive terms. It's one of the lexicons we're trying to develop. We're in an academic institution. We're concerned about emails about students or faculty, particular things. We highlight, it's like you're doing as good as you can to do at a broad sort of review of an archive. So a typical email archive for us is 50,000 messages. We have some that are 800,000. And those we've only taken in a few. I'm sure there'll be larger ones as well. And I know many institutions take in much larger email archives. So yes, no, I do not look at every message, just like I do not look at every letter in a collection. But at least the digital format allows us to do aggregate searches and pull things out that so you can pinpoint things you might be more concerned about through research. Yes, I'm sure we will miss some things, which is why we're only delivering full content in the reading room.
Yeah, I would say in regard to your point, Tom, one of the things, and I've used EPad just a little bit, several hours here and there, but one of the real pieces of genius, I would say, in the system is it is actually designed as a good human-computer interaction system around decision-making so that if a repository wants to follow the route you're talking about, EPad actually has built-in really good features to do that. The image browsing thing, for instance, when I connected it to my own account, I thought it was extremely helpful for identifying all those spam messages and things like that. Yeah, and it also, I will say this too, it does wonderful things, like in my own case, there was a really great picture of my brother and I standing outside of Edinburgh Castle that I'd completely forgotten about, It's really great because you can bulk mark things, so you could identify all the spam, bulk mark them, and choose to exclude them if that's what you want to do. But I don't think there's a right or wrong, way to do this. But one of the things I do like about EPad in particular is that there's a way to accommodate multiple approaches that may have that may put into practice a particular policy decision that had been reached, or agreement with the donor, or what have you. So, Megan?
Along those lines, I'm sitting here thinking, because a lot of what we're talking about are the personal archives of individuals, as so far as examples, as opposed to the records of institutions. Right. And I've been sitting here thinking, okay, how would we use this tool here to apply it to the records of Harvard? And I think it's possible
So Megan's comment essentially was, for those of you still listening online, was that, which I think there may be one of you left at this point, was essentially that this is a tool, or these tools are really essential because they're necessary for building the essential level of trust that either institutions or individuals would need to have to allow us to work with email. And I know that's a critical issue for us as well, because we face a rather extensive and or rather, I would say, frustrating conversation. This isn't being recorded, is it? with certain individuals in our institution of the legal persuasion, who don't seem to think that we can keep secrets without exposing them to other people. So anyway, the point is we have to have a way to do things like exclude certain types of messages, privileged and confidential legal advice, student records, and things like that. And this is a tool that can get us moving in that direction. Really, all these tools can.
Add to that, this is a really important thing for us to hang on to. 20 years ago, when the research was leading into archiving emails, it was very records management oriented and focused on very specific messages. And the reason why we moved away from that was it wasn't able to handle the volume that was being created. And you'll see the National Archives has moved to the record schedule modification. That essentially makes it person-based, right? So yeah, it's a journey that we're on. We have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the record management issues as well.
Yes, another question or comment?
A question, have any of you on the panel seen any requests for data mining across the accounts, like the kind of data mining that, say, Antitrust Research Center offers, where people are not really interested in a particular account, but in the usage or something like that?
We have not had any requests like that, but we designed our schema to facilitate that. So, because if we can create, all of us, speaking in general, a result that has the ability to be validated and compliant, then we can build tools to search across.
Yeah, so the question was essentially about data mining or querying across accounts, and I'm not sure if do either of you, Wendy or Glenn, have any?
So I haven't gotten any queries for data mining across collections or accounts, but we have gotten queries to use larger email accounts to do very similar things. It's an interesting thing. So at Stanford, I pass it up the chain of command, sort of asking, what do you feel about this? Is it okay to give them a hard drive? Is that totally no? For them to play around with. And this is a research center asking. Library administration doesn't want to do that at this point. I think that they're going to have to think about it a little more in depth, because I anticipate that some of these queries are only going to grow. Not necessarily about email. Maybe we will restrict that because of third-party issues, third-party privacy, but with large data sets. And maybe there are some things that we could really insist in. That's all.
Just one more thought on that. I think that some of the lack of requests we've received is because we haven't been able to provide access, right? So people don't approach you saying, let me get at this, until they see that they can. And it becomes a circular thing, and we're trying to break out
And that's,
as a community.
that's exactly what I was thinking. Since we don't have discovery and access, I wouldn't really hear yet, and it would be hearing from you all, actually. And Megan, have you had any thoughts in that?
Well, I think when I think back to when we started the project, we knew that we were going to have problems providing access.
Yeah.
And that's why we approached this the way we did, as I recall.
Yeah.
But we're now getting closer to that point, I think, where people are feeling more comfortable with it.
And have you heard of any requests for actual data mining of,
No, because I don't think they think they can do it.
Yeah, exactly. I really think that's,
Yeah, well,
this work is so heartening, and considering where we were, even 5 years ago, it's just, and having been in the field long enough to be of the generation that rang our hands and didn't really get it. It's really great to see this happening. At the same time, I think this discovery and access issue is brought, so email is one kind of record, right? And there are other kinds of form digital records, and then there are other kinds of analog records, and then there are audiovisual records. And I think Chris, as a historian, probably has a topic or a person or an entity that he wants to, and email might be part of that that interest, but it's not the whole thing. And I guess, one of the things that you might think about broadly is like how the email system fits into other discovery and access systems or record broadly.
I think that that's really a real key area to go. My role is to kind of sit above our more digital folks and our digitization folks. And a lot of what we've been doing recently with our digitized material is putting it out for crowdsourced transcription, which allows us to do data mining against that. And if there's a way then to bring those two together, then digitization allows us to expand the way that we approach material to a single approach, as opposed to saying, well, here's the computer for the digital stuff. Well, actually, here's the computer for the email, and here's the computer for the digital stuff. And then here are the boxes. Right? And we want to make it easier for scholars to do their research and not compartmentalize the records by type.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think actually that's the meta issue that's facing our profession right now, the issue that sits behind every other issue. I was going to mention, too, this idea of searching across accounts, which I don't remember who brought it up, but anyway, it is something that other communities are thinking about and, in fact, doing work in. So I mentioned at the beginning when I was doing my little intro that I had met with a computer scientist at Illinois earlier this week, and they're actually working in this area. They have graduate students working in this area, and there are startup companies that like to sell these kinds of things to places like attorneys general and companies that are providing, need to do fraud prevention and things like that, and they get quite a bit of actual money, to do this kind of work because there's a lot of good results that can come from it. So the interesting thing about it was we had a demo of a tool which I've just provided the little link to up here, which you can't just go and download it. It's not that kind of thing. But the way they pitch this to companies is actually as something called story engine. So what stories can you generate out of your data? So a story might be that some nefarious executives are plotting after hours to do some dirty deed, and you want to discover that story out of multiple email accounts and the relationships to each other. So I think obviously that's a different type of story than we'd like to see have happening, although it does happen quite frequently. But the important point is they see it as a story, which is the same way that historians look at things. They want to tell narratives, and tools that can be used to do that kind of work can also, I think, be applied to other applications such as cultural heritage. So anyway, it's a big issue. It's being looked at by other people as well. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Well, seeing none, I would just like to thank you all. Thank Harvard for bringing so many of us here to talk about these issues, and we look forward to continued conversations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.